Hey, what's up, guys? It's DarkArmedDuelist, and today I'm doing some Swordsoul test hands. So I'm really excited for you guys because this is actually suggested to me by one of my patrons, Jin. And this deck is a really amazing deck that is one of the best decks of the format that has some insane boards it can establish, and it's super consistent. So without further ado, guys, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell there so you can become part of the notification squad, and definitely check out the Patreon down in the description below for all those awesome rewards like getting your name description in every single video, getting assigned cards in the mail, and even getting to request a deck profile every single month you're a patron, along with test hands. And definitely give Jin some love down in the comments down below for suggesting such an awesome deck. So you guys know we got to pile shuffle the deck because that is dad rule number one. This deck is an amazing deck that has all sorts of different combos, and I am really excited to show off this deck in a test hand video because it can establish some insane boards, and it is super consistent. I really love the way that this deck plays, and the artwork for this deck is just phenomenal. It actually ties into the Dogmatica lore, which is a really amazing storyline, which you guys haven't checked out, you definitely should, because the storyline for Dogmatica is actually really amazing. So now that we got the deck pile shuffled up, we're going to give it a quick little shuffle and see what we can do for some test hands, because this deck is really insane and super consistent. So let's go ahead and see what we can do. So we're going to draw into a copy of Infinite Impermanence, a copy of the Strategist, Adahara, Ashuna, and a copy of the Sacred Summit. This is already a really good hand because we already have pretty much a special summon to our side of the field of a level 8 Synchro and a level 10 Synchro just in this opening hand without doing any crazy combos. That's what's really interesting about this deck, is it's actually fairly easy to learn as well, because basically what you're trying to go for in this deck is a level 8 and a level 10 Synchro monster, or go into a copy of your Yang Zing Synchro monsters as well. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and special summon out the copy of the Ashuna to our side of the field, and we're going to be able to use its effect to be able to just immediately link it away to go into a copy of the Monk, which then you can use the copy of the Ashuna's effect in the graveyard to banish it to summon out from the deck another Tenyi monster. Now keep in mind, when you use the effect of the Ashuna, it has the ability that it locks you into worms for the rest of the turn. That is the only downside of that card, but it's something to keep in mind as you play this deck. So we're going to go ahead and special summon out from the deck a copy of our Vashuda, which is a very good monster to summon because it's a level 7. It's going to help us out get into another copy of a monster. So at this point, you're going to normal summon out the copy of the Adahara and go ahead and synchro these two together to go in for your Grandmaster, which is usually the opening play, which this card is insane because it's a searcher that has a really good effect that if this card is synchro summoned, you get to add from your deck to your hand or banish from your deck one Swordsoul card. And also, quick effect, you can banish a Swordsoul card or a Worm monster from the graveyard and then target one effect monster on the field and negate its effects until the end of the turn, basically being an effect veiler, which is really good. So we're going to go ahead and use its effect to be able to get us a search of a Swordsoul card that we can actually discard to the graveyard for the Strategist, and then use its effect to be able to bring it back with the copy of Summit, because it's going to be really easy to actually pull off those plays. Actually, in this situation, I would grab a copy of Taie because we can get into multiple plays with the copy of the Taie if we discard that card to the graveyard off the copy of the Strategist, which is going to be pretty good for our plays. So we're going to go ahead and shuffle up the deck and see what else we can do. So at this point, I'm going to go ahead and use the effect of the Strategist to be able to discard from my hand the copy of the Taie, and it's going to set up my copy of Summit in my hand to bring back the copy of Taie to then use this effect to give me another token. So at this point, we're going to get a token on our side of the field because all of your Swordsoul monsters share the ability that basically when they're summoned by their own effects, they also give you a token on your side of the field that's a level 4 token that's also a tuner, which helps us go into all sorts of different synchro plays. So at this point, you can go in for some really interesting plays by going ahead and synchroing these two cards together on your side of the field to go directly into the copy of the Supreme Sovereign. Now you can go into two different monsters at this point because we are locked into worms. You can go into the new Sinister Sovereign, which I am proxying right now because I haven't got my hands on Battles of Chaos yet, but this card is a really good card to be able to go into, but I still really like to go into the copy of the Supreme Sovereign because it's a really good card. So at this point, you've gotten two really powerful monsters on your side of the field, and don't forget about your Swordsoul monsters that when they're used as synchro material, they get abilities. For your effect of your Strategist, it will do 1200 points of damage to your opponent, which is very good to be able to go in for time. So at this point, you have the copy of the Sacred Summit that you can actually activate. That's a Monster Reborn, lets you target any Swordsoul in your graveyard, and if you control a Synchro monster, you can target a Worm monster instead. But we're just going to grab back that copy of the Taie, because the Taie has a really good ability that you can banish a Swordsoul or a Worm from the graveyard to special summon a Swordsoul token to your side of the field, which is a really good effect to be able to just get another token to go in for another level 8 play. So at this point, we're going to go ahead and banish from the graveyard the card that we want to get back to our hand, which is going to be the copy of the Strategist, because we're going to get it back in just a minute. Now, the effect of the copy of the Taie will give us another token on our side of the field that we can then use with the copy of the Taie to send this card to the graveyard, and then we're going to summon out another level 8 Synchro monster. Now, I'm actually going to summon out a copy of the Yang Zing Baxia, which is a really good card because it's actually a walking Monster Reborn that's going to help us get into another play. Now, the effect of the Taie has an ability that if this card is sent to the graveyard as a sync material, you can send a Swordsoul card or a Worm monster from your deck to the graveyard. Now, as if you're me, I don't see a copy of Ashuna in my graveyard that I can banish for another copy of a Worm monster later on. So I want that copy of Ashuna in the graveyard because it's going to get me more plays later on for this particular deck. So we're going to go ahead and shuffle up the deck, which is going to help us out a lot to be able to go in for more plays. Now you can use the second effect of Baxia that lets you once per turn target one card you control and a level 4 lower monster in the graveyard, destroy the card that you have on the field, and if you do, you special summon the monster from the graveyard. So we're going to use this effect to get this copy of the Monk off our field to be able to bring back to our side of the field the copy of the Ashuna, which is then going to be able to go into a synchro play with the copy of the Baxia. So we're going to go ahead and synchro these two away to summon out a really powerful monster, Xiaofeng, the Phantom of the Yang Zing. Now this card is extremely powerful, especially with the materials that we actually just put into this card, and it's really good because this card has the ability that when this card is synchro summoned on the field, your opponent cannot activate cards or effects with the same original attribute as the Yang Zing monsters used to synchro summon this card, basically locking them out of light monsters because we put in a copy of Baxia. So we're basically logging our opponent out of their light monsters. We have the copy of the Supreme Sovereign that has the ability that basically for each banished card, he's gaining 100 attack, and monsters your opponent controls are losing 100 attack. And if he would be destroyed by a card effect, you can banish a card from the graveyard instead. And if a card is banished, then you can banish a card from both your opponent's field and graveyard, which is extremely good. And you have the copy of the Grand Master, that's basically an effect veiler, and the copy of the Infinite Impermanence that we can set to the field. Now, we're not even done here yet. We can actually use the copy of the Adahara to be able to banish that card from the graveyard to be able to grab back the copy of the Strategist to our hand. So when we draw next turn, we can actually go for an additional level 10 synchro play, which is going to be really good because we can go in for Baron de Fleur. So as we pass over to the opponent, we have this really insane board. We have two negates on the field. We have the copy of the Xiaofeng eating light monsters, and we have the effect of the Sovereign as well that can banish a card that your opponent's field and graveyard. When you banish the copy of the Adahara, you can actually protect it as well, because if it's going to be destroyed by a card effect, you can just immediately banish a card from the graveyard, which will actually make its effect go off, which is really good. And you have a pretty good setup graveyard as well. So when we go into the next turn, we're going to go ahead and draw for turn, which is going to be a copy of Ashuna, and then we can use the effect of our Strategist to be able to discard our Worm monster. And then once we do, we're going to special summon him out to our side of the field, give ourselves another token on our side of the field, and then synchro these together to do an additional 1200 points of damage to the opponent, and use the ability to be able to go into a Baron de Fleur, which is really good. I really love the copy of the Adahara being able to just banish itself to target any worm and add it back to your hand. That's so good to be able to use because you can actually get cards back out of the graveyard that way. So once you go into that copy of Baron de Fleur, you basically have your full setup. You can use it instead of going for Baron de Fleur, you can go for the new Synchro monster, which is another option for you guys if you want to establish all of your Swordsoul Synchro monsters. That is a way that you can actually pull it off. And you also have that copy of Infinite Impermanence to completely lock down your opponent, where you're going to get that monster negate, which is really nice, and shut down this entire zone of spells and traps, which is really good, especially if your opponent puts one in this column. Like, I really like that ability. So that's pretty much it for the first test hand. Let's go into the second one and see what we can actually do, because this deck, as you guys can see, is super consistent. Usually you're just trying to establish a couple of synchro monsters on your side of the field, which is very, very fun, and it's super easy to learn turn, because like all you're trying to do is get a monster out on your side of the field, and they're very simple effects that you have to pull off with this deck. So let's go ahead and shuffle up the deck and see what we can do for the next test hand, because this deck is really, really good and really fun to be able to play with. I'm really excited to see what this deck actually does this format, because it's really insane. So let's go ahead and shuffle up the deck and see what we can do. So we're going to go ahead and draw. We're going to draw into a copy of Ash Blossom, another copy of Ash Blossom, a copy of Adahara, a copy of Infinite Impermanence, and a copy of Effect Veiler. So this is where sometimes when you play as many hand traps as I do, and it's really important to be able to pile shuffle, you will run into a brick every so often with this deck. Now you can go in for a little bit of a play where you do summon out a copy of the Monk, but that's going to be about it. But you do have 3 negates in your hand with the 3 copies of your hand traps, which is okay to be able to do, but that is something that happens in this deck every so often. I'm glad it actually happened to show you guys that it can happen even in tier 1 decks. You can still brick if you don't pile shuffle. So we're going to go ahead and special summon out the copy of the Adahara, and I'm going to show you guys the best possible hand that you can actually pull off. We're going to go ahead and summon out the copy of the Adahara with its ability, summon out the copy of the Monk to our side of the field, and then you can go in and basically just have those hand traps in the hand because you don't really play anything else that you can synchro summon into. So at this point, you're going to go ahead and pass. Now you can stop your opponent 3 times, which is really good, because a lot of decks will stop after you trade 1 for 1, because at that point they're only going to have 3 cards in their hand to be able to combo with, and then we can draw into the next turn, which is a copy of the Moe, which isn't going to help us all that much because we don't have another Swordsoul to reveal in the hand. So let's go ahead and see what we can do for another test hand. That is something that happens in decks like this. Even with a tier 1 deck, guys, you still will run into bricking. Just because you play a tier 1 deck does not guarantee you that you're not going to brick. So let's go ahead and see what we can do for another test hand. So we're going to go ahead and shuffle up the deck. Again, really, really good this time. Go ahead and give it a couple of good riffles to see what we can actually do for our next one. So let's go ahead and draw and see what we can do. So we're going to go ahead and draw into a copy of Adahara, a copy of Infinite Impermanence, a copy of Moe, which is already better, Effect Veiler, and a copy of Vashuda. This is already a really good hand. This is already a lot better right off the bat, which is just really, really good. I'm really glad that we actually got a better hand. So let's go ahead and see what we can do. So we're going to go ahead and special summon out the copy of the Vashuda, link it away for the copy of the Tenyi Monk. That is always our opening play. Now at this point you have multiple options here. You can actually go for the copy of the Moe, which is going to be the main play that I would recommend with this deck to be able to go in, because you're going to get a +2, because you're going to get a card. You're going to get a card off of this, and then you're going to get a search off the other card, which is pretty good, and you already have 2 negates in the hand. That's the really nice thing about this deck, is your hand traps make up for the negates, which is what's really nice. So let's go ahead and normal summon out the copy of the Moe, reveal in our hand a Swordsoul or a Worm, which is the copy of the Adahara. And then you can use the ability to be able to summon out a token. Now then you can synchro these 2 together to summon out to your side of the field your copy of your Grand Master, which is really good because at this point you can use both of the effects to be able to use the ability of your Grand Master to be able to add a Swordsoul card from your deck to your hand, while also using the Moe to draw a card, being able to get into some really good plays. Let's go ahead and shuffle up the deck because we are going to draw a card, and let's see what we can actually get. So we're going to go ahead and draw a card, and we're going to get into a copy of Swordsoul Emergence, which is going to get us into another really good play if we search out another card from the deck that is a Swordsoul monster, because we can basically get into a copy of the Strategist, making another level 10 monster by searching it with this card. So at this point you're going to kind of pick and choose what you want from your deck, because you've already normal summoned for the turn, which was the Moe, and you don't want to special summon out the copy of the Adahara because you can't, because you control another monster that's not an effect monster. So let's go ahead and search from the deck a copy of the, say, maybe Sacred Summit at this point. Sacred Summit would help out a little bit because it could help us go in for an additional play, but let's go ahead and search out a copy of Blackout. Blackout's going to give us a little bit more of a defensive play, and I want to show you guys a little bit more of a defensive play with this deck. This card's really good because it searches any of the cards that you need. So let's go ahead and use the effect to be able to use with Emergence to add a Swordsoul card from our deck to our hand. And the effect is going to let us add from our deck to our hand the copy of the Strategist. And the Strategist lets us discard a Swordsoul or a Worm, which we're going to discard that copy of the Adahara to be able to special summon it to our side of the field, to give us a token on our side of the field, and then we can just synchro these 2 together to do 1200 points of burn damage to the opponent and summon out to our side of the field Baron de Fleur, because we haven't used a Tenyi Monsters effect by banishing it. So you can actually get a negate here and negate negate here with 2 more here and a double pop with the effect of the blackout, which is very good. This is actually a really good field. It doesn't look like a lot, but with the Baron de Fleur and the copy of the double hand traps and the Grandmaster, you have actually 4 negates with this right here. You have a double monster negate, or well, actually you have 3 monster negates. This can pop a card and it's a negate 1 time, which is really good to be able to use with this deck. Like, I really like that, and it helps out a lot, especially with the Baron de Fleur's ability that during the standby phase, you can target a level 9 or lower monster in your graveyard and return this card to the extra deck, and if you special summon it, so you can actually get back any of these cards that you want from the graveyard. Like, you can get back your copy of Ashuda back to your hand, or you can special summon it to your side of the field. You can get the Moe to your side of the field, which basically will get you into another level 8 Synchro monster. Like, the Moe is the main one that I usually grab back out of the graveyard. But let's go ahead and set this card to our side of the field, and then pass over to the opponent. Let's say the Baron de Fleur does negate. We pass back over to us, we draw, and when we draw, we're going to draw into a copy of Summit. So at this point, you can use the effect of the Baron de Fleur, put it back in the extra deck, bring back the copy of the Moe, because you know you have a Swordsoul in the hand. So we're going to reveal a Swordsoul in the hand, get another token on our side of the field, and then synchro these 2 together for another level 8, which at this point, we have an Ashuna in the graveyard. We actually have an Atahara in the graveyard, which is going to get us into another play, because we can summon out the copy of the Baxia again. This time you can actually use the Baxia's ability that has the ability to target cards on the field up to the number of different original attributes used to synchro summon this card that were, which you had at least 1. I think the copy of the Moe actually makes a water token on your side of the field. Yeah, it's a water, so you get 1 bounce with this card, and you will get to draw a single card off the copy of the Moe, which is a copy of the Strategist, which can discard the copy of the Sacred Summit to be able to get you another level 10 Synchro monster. But let's go ahead and use the copy of the Baxia's second ability, pop this card on our side of the field, and special summon back the copy of the Atahara. Go ahead and synchro these 2 together and summon out to your side of the field the Baron de Fleur again. So you have Baron de Fleur, or actually not Baron de Fleur, the copy, I almost made a Baron de Fleur, a copy of the Xiaofeng. Xiaofeng is going to be able to eat light monsters again, and then you have the ability of the Strategist in the hand to be able to discard the Summit to be able to give you another copy of a token, and then you can go ahead and synchro these 2 away to be able to summon out that copy of the Baron de Fleur, because we haven't used a Tenyi monster's ability to lock us into Worm. This card can pop a card on the field. This is eating light monsters, this is a negate, and then you have these in your hand as negates as well, and you have the copy of the Blackout that can give you additional plays. Now you can, instead of going for the Baron de Fleur originally, you could go for this card that would get you a banish as well. This card combos very well with Blackout if you wanted to summon this the first time instead of the Baron de Fleur, because it has the ability that for each banished card it gains 100 attack and defense, and your opponent's monsters lose 100 attack and defense. And if this card would be destroyed by a card effect, then you can banish a card from the graveyard, and if a card gets banished, then you can basically banish a card from your opponent's grave and field. So this card does come in handy, because this turns into a double pop, a banish from hand and a banish from field. So this card's really good to summon in place of the Baron de Fleur if you want to summon this card instead. I usually just summon it just in case, but it's a really good card as well to play in that test hand. So let's go ahead and see what we can do for one last test hand and see if we can pull off something really, really insane. So let's go ahead and shuffle up the deck. So as you guys can see, super crazy deck. Once it gets rolling, you can get into some really good plays. Now, the really neat thing about this deck is you can actually basically, if you summon out Baron de Fleur right off the bat, you can basically walk through Nibiru because you have that 1 negate. And it does pop 1 card on the field as well. So if you do go second, you can do pop a card every single turn, which is pretty good. But you can only get the negate once while it's on the field. So let's go ahead and shuffle up the deck and see what we can do for one more test hand. So we're going to go ahead and draw and see what we can do. We're going to draw into a copy of Ashuna, another copy of Ashuna, don't give us a third one, a copy of Atahara, a copy of the Strategist, and a copy of Moe. So we have some pretty interesting plays with this hand that you can actually pull off. So we're going to go ahead and normal summon, or special summon out the copy of the Ashuna, link it away, summon out the copy of the Monk, and then we have some really good plays. Now, depending on which way you want to go, depends on what you can do. You can actually get the Moe into the graveyard. You won't get a search off of it, but you can technically bring it back to your side of the field if you play your cards right. So let's actually do that. So what we're going to do right off the bat is we're going to normal summon out the copy of the Atahara instead of going for the copy of the Moe, and I'm going to show you why. It's the only weird thing about this deck is you kind of got to look at it and be like, okay, I see where I can actually get more pluses. So we're going to go ahead and banish the copy of the Ashuna, and the Ashuna is going to special summon out a copy of Vashuda from the deck. So we're going to summon out that copy of Ashuda. I see a level 8 Synchro monster, so we're going to go for a level 8 here. And we're going to summon out from the extra deck a copy of the Grand Master. Now, the Grand Master is going to get us a search because it just requires a 2 worm monster plus a tuner monster to summon this card. It's going to get us a search to be able to add from our deck to our hand a copy of the Swordsoul Summit, which is going to be really good to be able to grab because we can then discard the copy of the Moe and then bring it back. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and use the effect of the Strategist to be able to special summon it to our side of the field by discarding the Moe. And then once we do, we're going to be able to give ourselves a token, synchro these two together, and we're going to be able to lock ourselves into worms. So keep that in mind because you did banish the copy of the Ashuna. And we're going to summon out to our side of the field the copy of the Sovereign. You can summon out Sovereign or you can summon out the copy of the Supreme Sovereign. It's totally up to you which one of these two you actually summon to your side of the field. Depends on what your matchup is. I'm actually going to summon out the copy of the Supreme Sovereign again because I really like that card. And then we're going to use the effect of the Sacred Summit to bring back to our side of the field the Moe. Now, once we bring that copy of Moe back to the field, you can reveal the copy of the Ashuna in your hand. And once you reveal that copy of Ashuna, you're going to be able to get a token on your side of the field. And once you get that token, you can synchro these two together to be able to summon out another level 8, which is going to be this card, the copy of the Yang Zing. Use its effect to be able to target this on the field. And then we're going to bring back from the graveyard this copy of the Adahara by popping the copy of the Monk. And then we're going to synchro these two together. Actually, take a step back before we actually use the effect of that card. We're actually going to get a draw off the copy of the Moe. So actually, let's shuffle up the deck and get that draw off the Moe because we used it for the Synchro Summon of the Baxia. So we're going to get a draw off the copy of the Moe. And once we get that draw, it's going to be a copy of Ashuda, which can help us out later on if our opponent board wipes us. So now at this point, we're going to special summon out the copy of the Adahara by popping this card, going full play like we were before. Synchro summon these two together, and then summon out to our side of the field the copy of the Chaofeng that is eating light monsters again. This is the big field that you're going to be doing every single game with this deck. Like, this is the field that you're going to go for to be able to get all those really crazy plays, and it's very important to basically memorize the strategy to be able to get these 3 synchro monsters out on your side of the field as quickly as possible in the way that you can. Now, if you can only establish 2 with a couple of hand traps in your hand, that's totally fine. If you can only get 1, that's okay too, because you're going to have multiple negates. But even in the bad hand, I still had 3 hand traps, and I could still get 3 negates, and that's pretty good. So it's still a really good deck, and really amazing what it can actually pull off. This actually would have bounced something if I was going second, which would have helped out a lot to be able to bounce an additional card because I did put a Moe into it, which is 1 attribute, which is pretty good. Like, I really like that effect to be able to just get that shuffle, and it's just really helpful for this build. So I think that's going to do it for the test hands over this one, guys. As you guys can see, this deck is absolutely crazy. I really love how consistent this deck is. It's super fun to be able to play with, and it's insane the consistency that it has with the Tenyi monsters mixed into this deck, and it's just super fun. It can even go second with your copies of Ecclesia, which we didn't draw into our Ecclesia, and Ecclesia is just really good because you can just special summon this card to your side of the field and then tribute it basically and special summon out any Swordsoul you want. So you can get directly to a Moe, you can get to a Taie, you can get to anything that you need, and as the deck grinds on, it just gets better and better because you're getting your copies of your Tenyis into the graveyard to go into those really, really insane plays. If you guys would like to check out the deck profile, as always, it is down in the description down below if you guys would like to check that out. So anyways, guys, this is DarkArmedDuelist. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell there so you can come part of notification squad, and we'll see you guys in the next video. See you later, guys.